Something is moving just beneath the surface. A shape too large to belong here, too fluid to be anything familiar. It cuts through the black water without a sound. The river holds its breath, 40 kilograms of muscle and instinct moving through this ancient water like something the forest dreamed into existence. And then it is gone. The Amazon does not give up its secrets easily. It layers them, buries them beneath root and shadow in the slow green silence of a world that existed long before we had words for any of it. But something lives here, something that has been hunting this river for 5 million years. And even now, even after decades of expeditions, journals filled with field notes and tissue samples and acoustic recordings, science is still not entirely sure it understands what this animal is. A mammal that swims like a fish, hunts like a wolf, calls like a bird, and looks out at you from the water with eyes that hold a quality so uncomfortably familiar. It stops you cold, the giant otter, the river's apex, the forest's most improbable architect, and perhaps the most misunderstood creature in the entire Amazon basin. Tonight, we follow a family. There's a place in the western Amazon where 3 river systems converge: the Madre de Dios, the Manu, the Tambopata, where they meet. The water changes color. The clear, black water of the Tambopata, rich with tannins from decomposing leaves, presses against the pale clay brown of the Manu. And for a brief, extraordinary stretch of river, the 2 colors flow side by side without mixing, as if even the water here maintains boundaries, as if the river itself understands territory. This is the Manu Biosphere Reserve, one of the most biodiverse places on the surface of the planet. Scientists have recorded more species of birds in this single reserve than exist in all of North America combined. More species of fish here than in any river system in Europe. More species of amphibian, insect, fruit than most continents can claim. The Amazon is not simply a forest. It is a process, a planetary machine, converting sunlight and water and the slow decay of 10,000 years of organic matter into more forms of life than any other system on Earth. And through the center of it all, this river, the Amazon River System, the largest river network by volume in the world, it carries more fresh water than the next 7 largest rivers on Earth combined. At its widest, during the November flood season, it stretches for 50 kilometers from bank to bank. From space, it looks like a crack in a planet. From here, kneeling at the edge of a clay bank in the early morning, it looks like something else entirely. It looks like something's home. The oxbow lakes that form here during the flood season are the ecological epicenter of this part of the reserve. When the river rises and falls, it carves these still mirror-flat lakes from a floodplain filled with slow water, tangled with submerged roots and fallen trees. Black caimans glide through them like dark dreams. Hoatzin birds cluster on the branches above. Prehistoric, ungain, calling in voices that sound like arguments that will never be resolved. Giant river turtles haul themselves onto sandbanks with the slow dignity of creatures that measure time differently than we do. And at the edges of these lakes, where the water meets the forest in a tangle of roots and shadow, there are dens, low, half-submerged entrances, barely visible behind a curtain of roots and leaf litter. No footprints lead to them, no tracks, only the faint, sweet, slightly pungent smell of a place where many animals sleep together, and the silence that follows noise. The giant otter family that lives here has 7 members, a breeding pair, 3 juveniles from last season, and 2 cubs, born 12 weeks ago. The family has held this stretch of lake for 3 years. In the language of giant otter ecology, this territory represents something remarkable. It is stable. In a world where deforestation and mercury contamination from illegal gold mining have reduced giant otter populations by 80% over the last century, a stable territory with a breeding pair and surviving young is not guaranteed. It is in the truest sense of the word. A victory. The alpha female emerges first. She is enormous, 1.7 meters from nose to tail. She surfaces in the middle of a lake with barely a ripple, shakes the water from her broad, flat head, and then does something unexpected. She calls, not a bark, not a splash, a sound unlike almost anything in this forest. A high, complex, almost musical vocalization that rises and falls with a precision that sounds disturbingly like language within seconds. The lake erupts, 6 more otters, launching themselves from the den entrance into the water like a single coordinated explosion. The cubs tumble and last, still unsure of their buoyancy. Pawing at the surface with oversized feet, the family reassembles around the female, touching, vocalizing, rolling over each other in a display of physical affection, so intense it almost reads as relief, as if each night spent in the den is a small uncertainty, and each morning reunion is a small miracle. This is the daily covenant of a giant otter family, the checking in, the confirming of presence, the ritual that says, we are all here, and the river is still ours. The family's territory covers 11 kilometers of Oxbow Lake and connected river channel. Every day, they patrol its boundaries, not because they are afraid of what lies beyond, but because the boundary is the family. Giant otters are among the most intensely social mammals on Earth. They do almost nothing alone. They hunt together. They defend together. They raise their young together. Every adult in the family contributes to the raising of each new generation of cubs. The juveniles from last season, not yet sexually mature, not yet capable of forming their own families, stay and help. They babysit. They bring food. They sleep pressed against the cubs on cold nights. This is called cooperative breeding. And among mammals, it is relatively rare. Among otters, anywhere in the world, it is essentially unique. The science of the giant otter is a story of discoveries that keep arriving too late. The species was formally described by Western science in 1788, but for the century that followed, almost nothing was studied. The animal was known mostly as a fur. The giant otter's pelt is extraordinarily dense, extraordinarily fine. In the mid-20th century, it was among the most valuable fur-bearing animals in South America. Between 1950 and 1973, an estimated 20,000 giant otters were killed for the fur trade in Peru and Brazil alone. The species was not studied. It was hunted to the edge of extinction by the time the fur trade was banned. In most countries, by the early 1970s, the giant otter had vanished from most of its original range, from the rivers of Argentina, from Uruguay, from the Pantanals, western reaches, gone from memory before science had even begun to understand what was lost. What we know now, we know because of a small number of dedicated field researchers who arrived at these rivers in the 1980s and 1990s and began patiently, impossibly patiently, to rebuild the picture. What they found astonished them. The giant otter's brain is disproportionately large for a mustelid of its size. The mustelid family includes weasels, badgers, wolverines, minks, animals known for cunning, for problem-solving, for a ferocity wildly disproportionate to their body size. The giant otter is the largest mustelid on Earth, and it is, by every measure available, the most cognitively complex. Field researchers studying otter families in the Manu found that individual otters within a family have distinct, recognizable personalities. Some animals are consistently bolder, approaching novel objects or unfamiliar boats with curiosity. Others are consistently cautious, hanging back, watching. Some are the first to alarm call. Some are the last. This variation in personality within a social group, what behavioral ecologists call animal personality research, was once considered a uniquely human or higher primate phenomenon. Finding it in a mustelid, in a river otter, was not expected. The giant otter's vocalizations are even more surprising. Researchers have documented at least 22 distinct call types, each with a different acoustic structure, each reliably associated with a different behavioral context. There are calls for alarm, calls for contact, calls that signal the beginning of a hunt, calls that appear to function as individual signatures, the equivalent, in human terms, of a name. This last finding is among the most contentious in the field. The idea that an individual animal might produce a call that functions as its own identifying signal that other members of the group learn and use to refer to that individual is a form of referential communication. It has been documented conclusively in dolphins, tentatively in parrots, and in a handful of remarkable field studies conducted along rivers exactly like this one in giant otters. The alpha male is fishing in the shallows now, and watching him is a masterclass in what 5 million years of aquatic specialization looks like in action. He dives, not the shallow plunge of a bird, not the cautious descent of a mammal uncertain about depth. He enters the water like a torpedo, his nostrils seal, his ears flatten against his skull, his eyes, equipped with a transparent nictitating membrane, adjust to underwater vision in a fraction of a second. He can hold his breath for up to 8 minutes, though in practice, most hunting dives last between 30 seconds and 2 minutes. His tail is flattened horizontally. Unlike most otter species, whose tails are round, this flattened tail acts as a rudder, combined with his partially webbed feet. The largest of any otter species relative to body size, he achieves a maneuverability in water that his prey, however fast, however evolved, cannot match. He surfaces with a fish, not a small one, an armored catfish, more than 40 centimeters long. He holds it crosswise in his jaws, treads water, begins to eat it alive, head first, always head first. There's a practical reason for this. The spines of an armored catfish run from the head toward the tail. Eating head first means the spines flatten against the body and don't catch in the throat. How does a giant otter know this? It learns it from its parents, from watching, from the slow, patient, years-long education that begins the moment a cub first enters the water. And this is perhaps the most profound thing about the giant otter. Beyond the vocalizations, beyond the cooperative breeding, beyond the brain size and the personality variation and the possible referential communication is this: the giant otter transmits knowledge, not through genes, through behavior, through demonstration, through a cultural chain of learning that links each cub to its parents and its parents to their parents, stretching back through generations of this family, through this lake, into a past so deep and so continuous that the gap between instinct and culture begins to blur. It is the third day of the dry season. The water level in the Oxbow Lake has dropped 17 centimeters in the last week. The fish are concentrating, pulling back from the flooded forest margins where they spent the wet season, moving toward the deep central channel of the lake. And the family knows it. The morning patrol is different today. There is a purposefulness to the movement. The alpha female leads, swimming fast, low in the water. The others follow in a loose formation. Even the cubs, though they are still too young to contribute anything to the hunt, are swept along. The family has learned something, or the family remembers something, because this is not the first dry season. The adult pair have fished this lake through 3 previous dry seasons. They know where the fish go. They know the bend in the lake where the channel deepens to 8 meters, where the peacock bay school together in the cold, dark water, waiting out the heat, waiting to be found. The family arrives at the bend. The adults fan out, forming a loose semicircle across the mouth of the channel. This is not instinct. This is strategy, coordinated hunting behavior, where each animal takes a position that blocks escape routes for prey, has been documented in wolves, in orcas, in chimpanzees, and here, in a family of giant otters, on a shrinking oxbow lake in the Peruvian Amazon. The alpha female dives, the others hold their positions at the surface, watching. And then something extraordinary happens. A peacock base, startled by the female below, breaks toward the surface, directly into the path of the alpha male. He takes it in a single motion, no hesitation, no wasted energy. 30 seconds later, the female surfaces with a second fish. The juveniles dive. The lake erupts into a churning, vocal, exuberant chaos of diving otters and thrashing fish and the sounds of a family at work. In 40 minutes, the family catches 11 fish, enough for every animal, including the cubs, who receive pre-chewed fish from both parents and from 2 of the juveniles, enough for the morning. But the dry season brings more than concentrated fish. It brings neighbors 3 kilometers down the river channel, where the Tumbopata broadens into a slow brown bend. A young male otter has been living alone for 6 months. He was expelled from his birth family to the north, a normal event in giant otter ecology. Subadult males, as they approach sexual maturity, are driven out by the dominant breeding male. Not violently, not always, but insistently. The pressure accumulates over weeks. The young male is displaced at feeding sites. His vocalizations are met with increasing aggression from the alpha until the calculus becomes clear: leave or remain and never breed. He left. He has been alone since October. A solitary giant otter is a profoundly unusual thing to see. The species is so wired for social contact, so dependent on the vocal and physical exchange of group life, that solitary animals display what appear to be behavioral symptoms of isolation. They are quieter, their patrol behaviors become erratic. Field researchers working in the Manu have observed solitary males vocalizing into empty water, calling, receiving no answer, calling again. What we cannot know is what that silence means to an animal that has never before experienced it. What we can observe is what it does to behavior over time. Solitary males in the Manu have a significantly lower daily foraging efficiency than grouped animals. They spend more time in vigilance behavior, more time watching the surface, more time checking over their shoulders. The group is not merely convenient for a giant otter. The group is the condition of safety, the condition of competence, perhaps even the condition of something we might hesitantly call well-being. This young male is moving upriver. He has no way of knowing that the family territory begins at the large Cecropia tree 200 meters ahead. Or perhaps he does. The scent marking that giant otter families deposit along their territorial boundaries is extraordinarily dense. Latrines, where every member of the family deposits feces and anal gland secretions at regular intervals along the bank, communicate not just presence, but number, but reproductive status, but health. A lone young male approaching the boundary of a 7-member family is approaching a wall of information that tells him, turn back. He hesitates at the boundary. He surfaces and holds position at the water's edge, scenting, reading the chemical language of a family he has never met. And then the alpha female appears at the surface, 40 meters upstream. She sees him. There's a pause of perhaps 3 seconds, the longest 3 seconds on this river. Then she alarm calls, a sound like tearing fabric mixed with a musical note. It carries across the lake and through the trees and all the way back to the den. The family responds in under 30 seconds. All 7 animals converging on the boundary point at the Cecropia tree, forming a line across the water, vocalizing in a coordinated, overlapping, deafening chorus that fills the whole bend of the river. The young male backs away, slowly at first, then faster, and then he is gone around the bend and downstream and back into his solitary reach of river. The family vocalizes for another 90 seconds after he disappears. Then, one by one, they fall silent. The alpha female is the last to stop. She holds position at the boundary for a long moment, looking downstream. Then she turns and swims back toward the lake, toward the cubs, toward the den, toward the warm, crowded, vocal center of a life that belongs entirely to this water. The light is changing now. The Amazon afternoon is arriving the way it always does. Without announcement, the sun drops behind the canopy and the gold drains out of the water, and the forest shifts from green to gray-green to the deep, layered blue-green of evening. The family is back at the den. The cubs are nursing. The juveniles are pressed together at the entrance. Half out of the water. The alpha male is grooming the alpha female with a slow, methodical attention that looks, from a distance, like tenderness. There are perhaps 5,000 giant otters left on Earth, down from an estimated 100,000 before the fur trade. 5,000 animals spread across what remains of the accessible river systems of South America. Their greatest threats now are not hunters with rifles. They are subtler mercury released into the rivers by illegal gold mining operations, accumulates in fish, is consumed by otters, concentrates in organs, reduces reproductive success, silently, invisibly, over years. Deforestation at the river margins removes the sheltered banks where dens are built, reduces the fish diversity that stable otter territories depend on, boat traffic on tourist routes through protected areas, disrupts family cohesion, habituates animals to human presence in ways that make them vulnerable. None of these threats announce themselves. None of them look like extinction. They look like progress, like development, like the perfectly reasonable needs of human communities, living alongside one of the most biodiverse river systems in the world. And that, perhaps, is what makes them so difficult to address. It is easier to stop a man with a gun than to redirect the 10,000 small decisions made by 10,000 people that add up to the slow erasure of a species. But here, tonight, in this lake, in this last wild reach of the Manu Biosphere Reserve, 7 giant otters are alive. 2 of them are cubs who have survived their first 12 weeks, the most dangerous 12 weeks of their lives, and they will face many more dangerous weeks ahead. But tonight, they are here, in the den, pressed against each other in the dark, warm and whole, and together. The Amazon is the oldest continuous ecosystem on the surface of the planet. It has been doing this for 60 million years, building complexity, layer by layer, species by species, connection by connection, until every creature in it is stitched so thoroughly into the fabric of everything else that pulling on any single thread risks unraveling something too large, too interconnected, too ancient to be rebuilt. The giant otter is one of those threads, an apex predator that shapes fish populations, that clears marginal vegetation through latrines, that creates, in its territorial patrols, a kind of biological governance of the river system. Remove it, and the lake changes. The fish populations shift. The vegetation thickens where it shouldn't. The caimans move differently. The water itself behaves differently. We do not always get to know what we have lost until the river shows us. In the morning, the family will emerge from the den at dawn, and the alpha female will call, and 6 animals will answer. And for a brief, extraordinary moment, this ancient lake will be full of the most improbable sound in the Amazon, a family announcing itself to a forest that has always known it was here, that has always, in its deep, unhurried way, been listening